Good morning and welcome. Good afternoon, actually, since the show is actually called the Caffeinated Cooper Show PM Saturday News. Good afternoon. It is wonderful to see all of you. We have some cool news stories that are good news stories. I'm not hitting you with death and disparity. No, these are really good news stories. But up first, I have JC Schweingruber, and he's coming up. Here he is with Vista Front Partners. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Happy Saturday to you and all the audience. I hope everybody's having a good one.
Yes, absolutely. Happy Saturday to you too. Now, I know you're in the Virginia area. Are you covered up with snow?
Yeah, it's about 25 degrees here, which is the warmest it's been in about 3 days. So the sun's finally out, so it's starting to melt off a little bit, and supposed to be up in the upper 30s by the end of the afternoon. So, yeah, we got walloped. I've been stuck in for like 2 days,
I'll tell you
but
what.
that's okay. It gives me time to kind of catch up on other projects and have a little fun doing some podcasting and whatnot. So.
Totally. My kids are jealous. They're really jealous because we have, so my sister-in-law is just outside of Nashville, and my sister and my nephew are just outside of Nashville. So we have some family there, right? And they were watching the forecast come through, and they'd see it's like ice, snow in Nashville and above,
Yeah.
and we would be rain. we're just a little rain. And they're like, oh, I got to go to school. And I'm like, you've been off for 2.5 weeks. I think we can manage.
Yeah, like one more day. I guess it couldn't hurt. But yeah, I mean, you couldn't build a snowman with this. You might be able to chisel an ice castle, maybe, but that's I'm not throwing a snowball at my neighbor without killing him by accident. So.
You could probably find some clean snow and make some new cocktails or something.
Oh, that's true. I could probably try that. I'll give anything a shot. So we'll see.
Anything to stay warm this time of year, right?
Yeah, why? Yeah. The heater's getting some extra work. Actually, it's been so cold at night, like single digits. It's when you have to turn your water on, let a little stream run of cold water to make sure your pipes don't freeze.
Mm-hmm.
So it got that ugly kind of cold.
Yes.
But hopefully that passes soon.
You know what? I really welcome it. I know this isn't just the weather report, guys. We're going to get to it in a minute, but I really welcome that hard freeze. And we've had a couple of nights of hard freeze. Now, ideally, I need like a few weeks because it kills off the bugs here. And our bugs are just like, they show up at the breakfast table like, what's for breakfast? I mean, they're huge. They have a personality of their own. So I welcome the cold. It's really, it's in the 20s today in our morning hours, our 20s, and the feels like is in the teens, but it's not. So this is
what you mean. That first good freeze of the year, like in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
I love it because it kills all the bugs and all the wasps and yellow jackets, so they can just die and go to hell where they belong. Because I hate them. I have a battle with these things all summer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, so let's get into the financial report. What has happened? Let's see. This is our first news since the new year, right?
Yeah, so we wrapped up 2021. The S&P was up 27%, or just slightly under, but 27%, which is a great return. So despite the pandemic and the lockdowns and all that, and all the volatility that we've seen, which has just been enormous. Well, 2020 was really bad with volatility, but to have two back-to-back years where the S&P did really well was really incredible. I got a list. I just printed off a list here, and I'm going to read through all the crap that we've been through just in 2021, and then kind of put that in context. It's like, all right, all that, and we're up 27%. Yeah, we started the year off with a political crisis. Mm-hmm. Great way to kick off a year, right? And then we had massive deficit spending and debt increases, with $1.9 trillion COVID-19 spending packages passed in March. All that money flooded into the economy. What do you think is going to happen? Well, inflation. But they didn't stop there. You can always count on Washington, D.C., no matter who's in power, to keep printing money and keep spending money we don't have. But here's some good news. Household savings and net worth soared in 2020 and 2021. But the increase for demands and goods put a lot of stress on the supply chain. So even though we saw savings and net worth soar, toward the end of the year, we started seeing those inflation numbers kick in. It really kicked some of that back down, which is really just I hate to say it, but inflation is a terrible tax, especially on middle class and lower income people. They don't really have the extra money to spend on things. Um, and so, I mean, it's putting gas in the car becomes a priority, and groceries more than just like a normal thing you would do.
Mhm.
The housing market was the strongest it's been in over a decade. And then that led to really steep increased housing prices all the way across the country. We saw these meme stocks. This was a big part of the year. This is a big theme. These meme stocks, AMC, GameStop, Robinhood. Those things that were trading on platforms like Robinhood. They shot up and were just so popular, and a lot of people made a lot of money if they got out. The whole point of the whole meme thing was to buy and hold, which was to kind of stick it to the hedge funds for what they've done to stocks over the years. Which, the little guy won for a change. Great, I love it. But as soon as the little guy starts winning, that's when the regulators come in, because we can't have the hedge funds get beat up, right? So, but hopefully a lot of people sold and took their gains, and found some more stable things to play in. But second half of the year, what those things do, predictably, they fizzled out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we're going to, well, we may see a lot of the meme stocks just have horrible balance sheets. I'll just put it that way. So if you're looking to buy those, don't make it any money that you need. Do your research, see if you're comfortable. So inflation run hot the second half. We have the Delta variant. Then we have now Omicron. And we had these things called SPACs that popped up this year. And that stands for Special Purpose Acquisition Companies. They were really, really popular early on, but a lot of these companies that went in there to get additional funding, startup funding, they fizzled out. So we've seen a lot of things go on this year. And despite that, we're up 27%, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take those odds. And if you think 2021 was volatile, you should have went back and looked at the numbers for 2020, because they were twice as ugly.
Mm-hmm.
So not too bad of a return. And I guess here we're at the first of the year. A lot of people will start getting their year-end statements coming in soon from wherever they invest at. So take some time to sit over it, look at it, and make sure you're comfortable with those holdings. And as the market transitions, we have a lot of things that will happen in 2022. Think about your strategy and your long-term planning, because two things that's going to continue from this year, we're still going to see a lot of supply chain issues. I don't think it's going to get any better. Some say it's going to be short-lived. I personally don't think it's going to get any better for a while. Inflation is still going to run hot, and the Fed is going to have to raise rates. So they're already prepping people for that. Mm-hmm. So anytime the Federal Reserve starts raising rates, that stock market volatility kicks up. You see people transitioning from some types of investments to more defensive type stocks, and that'll keep people on their toes. And if you're kind of a home gamer, as they call you, invest on your own, you're going to have to pay attention to your statements more often. You're going to have to, especially if you're buying individual stocks, if you're buying funds and you're buying long-term and willing to hold, if you have a good fund that's, highly rated fund with good, solid fund management, take opportunities on the dips that we'll see this year in the market. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to put money to work when the market's getting beat up. Keep cash on hand where you can add to a good investment so that it rewards you later. And there's always a possibility of what's called a black swan event, Elizabeth.
Okay.
These are things that just come out of nowhere and hit the economy, like a terrorist event or something like that. That crash that came in 2009 when the banking debacle, and just everything went haywire and the housing market collapsed. And so, I mean, any number of things that you don't see coming could happen. It always does. Mm-hmm. There's always these events out there. We have elections coming up in November. I think usually off-year elections don't really matter that much. I think they probably will this year. Mm-hmm. And so those are some things to definitely be concerned about. We'll probably have 2 or 3 more variants of COVID. It's just going to happen.
Sure.
So a lot of things to look forward to this year. How do you feel about that?
I think you're touching on a lot of points that makes me, just the uneducated yet desired to be investor. And, we do hold a portfolio, a couple of them. And, you listen to the news and it's doom and gloom and it's horror, horror, horror. And I've talked to so many people where they're like, oh gosh, I don't want to get involved with the market right now. Like I want to sell everything off and just sit on it. And I like what you said about taking advantage of the dips because worldwide, it definitely looks like we could be setting up for a world war. We have some action in the Middle East that we've seen this week going on. It could amp up to where we have several entities all at once. Well, how is that going to play into our market?
Yeah, it's always going to impact things. First of all, like energy.
Mhm.
So it spikes energy up. I mean, when we shut down our pipelines and started transitioning to buying back oil from OPEC earlier in 2021,
Mm.
well, that did us no favors as far as being prepared for something like that. Yeah, we always have things on all kinds of fronts. North Korea just fired off a rocket, kind of rearing their head again. They're kind of a puppet regime of China. We all know that. We
Mhm.
kind of have the beginnings of a Cold War with China going on.
Mhm.
Russia's amassing troops at the border of Ukraine,
Yes.
and then NATO is kind of sort of threatening them. So, how many wars do you want to fight at one time? And the thing is, anytime you show any kind of a weakness, that's when people start to do these things. So we've had things like inflation pop up, political turmoil, half the country divided against the other half. Um, but we've always seen wars and rumors of wars. I'll just throw that out there. It sounds so biblical, but these things, even during the Cold War with Russia, we were kind of on the brink of war a lot of times, and even the public didn't know it, but sometimes, but the markets still continue to perform. So the good news is, despite all these distractions that are out there, companies are earning record profits right now.
Mhm.
And that looks like that's going to continue into 2022. Even though you see some sector rotation, that's also a good thing because people are not looking at some of these high flyers like let's invest and get rich quick kind of things. Let's hope we buy the next Amazon or the next Microsoft early, and they're switching back to more traditional type investments that actually have good earnings, have pricing power, and pay their stockholders dividends while they wait.
Mhm.
Interest rates right now are rock bottom lows. So even if we do start raising interest rates, which we will, it's still going to be historically low compared to to the long term averages. We've been way too low for way too long, and when that happens, you add bubbles to the market. In which case, the housing bubble back in 2009, 2008. I saw that coming back in 2007. I was talking to a friend of mine in Cincinnati about because I worked on the bond desk at another firm at the time, a big national firm that I'll not name, but I was working on their bond desk and I was seeing these types of things that were being sold. And I was, at some point, I just sitting there talking to my buddy Tim, and he'd been working there in compliance for a while. And I said, at what point does Bear Stearns not understand uh, um, proper risk management? Because just the leverage that they had on some of these assets that we could sell for them, come through our platform. And sure enough, the first two companies to drop in 2009 were Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. And you were buying them literally, their competitors bought them out on pennies on a dollar. And, so to kind of be forward looking, I mean, sometimes you don't see those things coming. Not at the level that it did. I mean, it was nice to be able to see like what are they selling this stuff for. But but the good news is, that the companies are still earning, but find those good solid companies that'll pay you dividends. And the bad thing, well, the good news is there's a lot of older people with rates going up that live on fixed income that need these types of
Mhm.
things. So maybe they're going to have something to rely on a little bit more than just trying to find a stock that pays a dividend, where they maybe want a treasury or something that pays a little better.
Right.
So, but there's still great yields out there to be had in stocks and dividends.
Mhm.
So that's in defensive stocks. That's where you start to see a transition.
So what is your forecast, maybe even personally, about some of the goods and transportation and the delay in that transportation that we're still seeing? We're still seeing many, many, many boats waiting to offload at port. The ports don't seem to have enough people or drivers to be able to get some of those goods out to our retail stores. How do you see that bringing an impact into 2022?
Yeah, it's still going to have a pretty significant impact. The problem with that is there's so many spokes to that wheel that's causing this. And the thing that you see in the mainstream media is Well, because the market opened back up, the economy opened back up. There's such a big demand. Everybody's just rushing in with big demand that they can't keep up, and that's what's caused the supply chain.
Mm.
Well, that's probably part of it, but it's not the main part. But it takes a lot of small parts to make a big problem.
Right.
And another problem is a lot of the places where we have goods made, China.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times they've shut down various provinces. They don't talk about that in the mainstream media. How many cities that are in China? They're just mammoth. They're just huge. Some that are like bigger than LA that we've never even heard of. Well, we do a lot of manufacturing in those cities, and there's one right now that they literally just shut everyone down. You were allowed to let two people leave your home a day just to go like on a grocery run, and then you had to go back in. And they have, well, China, they have people there marching to make sure everybody's in, and they're out disinfecting the streets. I have no idea what for, but then they stop allowing people to come out for food.
Mm.
And behind firewalls, people are sending out pictures and audio of like, listen, we're starving over here, and people will not let us go out and get food. And people that from this other, I don't know what else is going on, but there was some other. This kind of leaked out into an Italian press that people were dropping dead over there. So you can't even go to work and make the goods where we have these plants to be shipped from. And then they shut down various ports and docks in China and throughout Asia. That clogs the wheels too. So you have the port, the boats that are setting off, say, the coast of California right now. They can't get in fast enough. Once they do get in, they unload their goods, but they don't have enough trucking capacity. We have a shortage. We're about 50,000 truck drivers short in this country, and we have been for about a decade.
Wow.
So the logistics problem is just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I know people are throwing off on our current transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, which he should have been on this from the beginning. But this is a problem that we've seen coming for 10, 15 years. So everybody that's kind of piling on this one guy, I'm saying, okay, what about the last 3 or 4 guys and gals that were there that had that job and just bungled it, didn't care, kicked the can down the road. And once that dam breaks, it's hard to get all that water back in there, and that's what Buttigieg is sort of dealing with. So I kind of feel a little bad for the situation he's in. And he's probably not the best person to run the department because he's never worked in that before being a mayor of a small town. So they desperately need to get more help in that regard, just to get the national logistics together. But having a shortage of truck drivers is just terrible. I have a brother who's a truck driver. He's a long haul truck driver, him and his wife, and their truck runs 24/7, and they do not stop. They're from Georgia, and they will drive to California. Now, another problem that they said is they were opening up the ports there in California 24/7. Well, that turned out not to be true. About 3 months later, we found out they still hadn't done that. And they only allow union drivers to go in and get the goods. And there's tons of non-union drivers that have been wanting to go out there and get these goods. So because of California law, that is another thing that's hampered us. So it's not just what's going on in China, which is probably the start of the problem, and with the shipping and the amount of goods that we have made over there, which is a dangerously large amount of goods.
Yeah.
Including 90% of our pharmaceuticals that people don't realize. But we're shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to getting the goods distributed around the country. Companies are kind of getting around that, like Walmart, Amazon. They're building their own trucking fleets now, and it probably won't be another decade before we start seeing self-driving trucks.
And that's really interesting. So the 2 different points, I want to hit on one that you had just mentioned about the pharmaceuticals. Here in Georgia, not too far up I-85, which is our main highway that goes pretty much east-west here. There is a massive plant, and it is a plant making batteries, all types of different batteries. And I thought that was very interesting. And then I read an article and I looked it up to kind of verify it, because I never, ever, ever know what I'm reading, right? So there are 3 pharmaceutical manufacturing plants that have opened up. They are one of which I think is backed by Pfizer outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And they're making all of our pertinent medications, mainly our antibiotics. So azithromycin, penicillin, bringing it back here in the country. And I thought that was very, very, not only enlightening, but very telling.
Yeah, it is. And I know drugs here are not cheap, and neither is insurance. And I know a lot of people have been buying from Canada some of their over-the-counter drugs that would be prescription here, and then vice versa, things that they can't get in Canada because of they have a very slow healthcare system. They come down to the States to get treatment on certain things. But when I found out that over 90% of all of our vitamins are made in China, and over 90% of all of our pharmaceuticals, at that point I started thinking, all right, that is a national security issue. That's just not a company making a decision to make a product. You know, if my mother can't get her heart medication, you know, because of supply chain issues, or somebody else that has arthritis that can't get their medicine to help manage pain. I mean, these are terrible things. Blood pressure medicine. So why do we run the risk? And I kind of put that back on some of the companies and their bad decisions just to save a buck, which I know that's their role and their responsibility to pay their shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes there's issues that are a lot bigger than just saving a buck.
I agree with you. I to that point, I think some of the regulations possibly should be more specific. I don't know that they're too harsh. I heard forever and ever that they were. So here's where my backstory comes from. My father worked for Beecham, which was then Beecham Smith Kline. Now it's all, I believe, absorbed under Merck at this point. And the manufacturing was in Piscataway, New Jersey, where many, many other pharmaceutical manufacturing plants were. And they were all driven out of the area by the EPA, because the regulations had become too stringent to do any productivity whatsoever. So then it went to Connecticut. And some of those manufacturing plants were able to manufacture in Connecticut, but not in New York, New Jersey. And then years flash forward, it's overseas. So, I'd love to be able to see the ability to be able to open up some of these manufacturing plants of pharmaceuticals. Once again, to your point, we should be able to get what I think is common medication, heart pressure, blood pressure medication, heart medications. Why is, I don't know. I guess maybe on a common sense, I'm sitting here going, why is that so expensive? Why is it not readily available for the other medications? And then you have, in the opiate world, such a sensation of, featuring everybody who overdoses on a medication to make it virtually impossible to get for the patient who needs it, when in reality, an overdose is a choice. It's not like you take your prescribed medication and you're going to overdose. That's not how it works. That's not how it ever worked. You have to actually abuse something to overdose on it. So why are we punishing the mass majority of people who need those medications? I don't agree with it.
A lot of it just doesn't make sense. And one of the reasons companies go overseas to make these things is to get around these EPA regulations. And when they run to China or Mexico, well, actually Mexico is getting better with their environmental standards. And a lot of people want to complain about here in the U.S. We're one of the cleanest nations in the country. Even when we had pipelines going, we're still. So if we move all of our, I have a real problem, and this is me personally, because this is part of a political opinion. But when we move all of our companies and manufacturing to a place like China, we're loading their pockets. China is a communist nation, and they are diabolically and philosophically, at odds with nations like America and those other nations in the West that are allies with us. We're mostly a capitalistic country. We should be. So they do a lot to undermine U.S. not just the dollar of our value by pegging over there, but every dollar we spend on something we pick up in, say, Walmart, for example, that's made in China, we're giving a bullet to a soldier over there that may be used against one of ours, because they are pushing aggressively out into the South China Sea, threatening Taiwan, which is an ally of ours, which makes, by the way, almost all of our semiconductor chips. And if they really wanted to obliterate America's progress going forward, they would wipe out Taiwan right now. And good luck ever getting another car with a computer chip in it for the next 10 years. Good luck advancing your computers, or getting new computer equipment without it costing some crazy, ungodly amount of money on a very limited supply.
Mhm.
They know that.
Mhm.
That was a stupid mistake, strategic mistake of ours. So anytime we move to a country like China, that's not an ally, that we're kind of in the brooding beginnings of a Cold War with, that are communist, that literally have people in concentration camps because of their religion or something they've said.
Mhm.
They literally have over 1 million of a Muslim population in concentration camps.
Mhm.
They do, and it's not far from Wuhan, from what I understand. So they actually pollute more in the environment in Canada, or not in Canada, but in China, and with our ally India, because they don't have any kind of environmental standards. So when all the people that are like, and I want to protect the environment just as much as anybody else. I want a clean world to leave to our
Mhm.
heirs. But when we do business like that to avoid EPA standards here, if we're going to have global warming and the world's going to come to a crash in 20 years, well, what are we waiting on? Why do we not start bombing China right now? Because they're not going to stop building coal-fired plants. They're not going to stop polluting at ungodly levels unless you stop them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so I would throw that out there. That's a very big concern, but I would love to see a flood of companies come out and bring our manufacturing back, because after NAFTA passed, a lot of people don't realize this, but from the mid 90s on to say about 2005, we lost over 70,000 manufacturing plants in America.
Mhm.
All those good middle class, well paying jobs gone
Yeah.
to avoid EPA regulations, to get around tariffs and trade costs. So I mean, there's a cost to all this, and we all have to pay it at some point. And I know that sounds so depressing. I hated to get off on that tangent, but there's so many things that we can do to kind of fix our own problems. We just have to have kind of the political and economic will to do it. There's God knows they're not going to stop printing money, right? They're going. So there's plenty of that around.
No.
But yeah, there's another trend I wanted to bring up. I don't want to take
Sure.
up all your time, but there's another trend I wanted to bring up that's going on. That's a great thing, I think, for the future of just employment.
Mhm.
And this is what's called the Great Resignation. And back in November, we had such a lousy jobs report, and everybody was focusing on that. And it's like, well, how did the unemployment rate go down? But yet the jobs sorely disappointed. Right? I mean, they just came so far under; it's almost embarrassing. There's what's called a Great Resignation going on right now in this country. In November alone, 4.5 million people left their jobs. Just left their jobs. They're looking for something better. And in an environment that have so many job openings, that gives people the opportunity to find something they may be more, the pays better, happier at. Maybe they want to try to be an entrepreneur. That would be great. I would love to see an explosion of ideas and entrepreneurialism in this age of like just growing knowledge of technology, to make our lives better. And that could be a good thing. Um, so I've heard some people say, "Hey, this is just the trend of the moment." Well, no, it's actually the trend, and it's changing the entire workplace. Now, most of the jobs we see people leaving are in the service sector jobs,
Okay.
which I think it's going to force places to get more automated, like your fast food chains and things like that, to get more automated with less employees. But I don't know about you. When I go out to eat at a restaurant where I sit down, I like to have plenty of employees around. I like that. But that's going to change. But for other types of corporate workforce, you're actually going to be able to see most of the people that work there be able to stay home part of the time, at least part of the week.
Mhm.
And I think that is changing for the better, because one, you don't have to keep building and upgrading infrastructure all the time.
Mhm.
Cram a building full and then build another building, and require people to waste time and effort. If we're all using Zoom,
Mhm.
and we can get our work right on our desktop in our home office,
Sure.
that is a big deal. I mean, that's. I think we all saw this on the Jetsons. How did we not see this coming?
We did.
But so with all these people leaving, I just want to caution people about one thing. And if you're leaving your job, and I hope you find a better job, something that pays better, something you're going to be much happier doing, or even if you're brave enough to strike out and do your own thing, do not leave your 401k behind. That's the first thing you should do after you resign, is roll your 401k over into your IRA.
Mm-hmm.
And don't have an IRA, set one up and roll it over. And here's why. People, we have a short memory. All of us do, we forget things. And we have about a $16 trillion economy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yearly GDP. Did you know that $1.3 trillion is out there right now and left behind old 401ks that people have forgotten about?
No.
1.3 trillion. And 300 billion of that is estimated to be unclaimed. In other words, it's been there so long that it's went somewhere else. Like maybe the company you used to work for. I'll give you an example. I know somebody this happened to. Company they worked for 20 years ago. They left and went to another job. Just left their old 401k there. And they would still get their statements saying it'd be okay. Well, the company bankrupted. Now, that doesn't mean that the 401k bankrupts, because that's separate. That's investable money in mutual funds or whatever they had in their 401k. Well, they just kept letting it ride. And then eventually, because that company wasn't there to pay the fees to those people who managed it, that folded up. And kind of like if you didn't pay your credit card and they sold it to a debt collector, well, that's what happens to your old 401k. Somebody else will come in and hold it for a while. And if it's not claimed, to make sure that they protect investors, they liquidate everything you have into cash. Well, okay, your money's not working for you at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You're not stuck. And then if it's not claimed after a while, it goes somewhere else and then somewhere else. And then eventually it maybe ends up at your state treasury. And then you have to go through all these hoops just to claim your assets. So I know somebody who literally got a letter in the mail from the IRS that they had unclaimed assets from an old 401k 20 years ago at a company that went bankrupt, and they still cannot find it a year later.
Wow.
And it was a significant amount of money.
That the amount of money that's left behind, that's a significant amount of people who do leave it behind.
Exactly. That's a lot of people. Now imagine 4.5 million people left their jobs in November. And
Wow.
they have those that are in those 401ks. And some of them, there's a percentage that'll keep up with it. And that's great. That's awesome. But don't forget to roll that over, because, if you leaving it behind, you're still paying fees to the old plan. Why would you do that if you're not there anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, when you roll it over into an IRA, well, you have unlimited choices of investments in your 401k or 403b plans, depending on what job you have. You have limited choices of what funds to choose. And sometimes those funds, because they're specifically made for those plans, sometimes those funds are pretty good. Sometimes some of them are really good. And then some of them just suck. All right. There's no other way to put it. I've seen 401k plans that have lousy choices in funds. You had 10 funds, 5 of them I wouldn't touch.
Mm-hmm.
And two of the others are money markets. So it's like, what do you do? So always make sure you roll that over and take full advantage of the market. Don't let it take advantage of you. That's I remind people that all the time. Now on our website or our Facebook page, facebook.com/Vista Front Partners Inc. I did put a link up on that where you can, if you have an old 401k and don't know where to find it, it's an article that has some links up in there. It was put out by Charles Schwab, and you can actually click on some of those links, and it may help you find your old 401k. So it's a place to start if you're missing one. And while you're there, give our page a like if you want.
Oh, that's awesome. I am writing that down because I want to go back after the broadcast and go find it myself. So that's on Facebook, and it's going to be Vista Front Partners Inc. And you have links on there, and the links will take you to an article to where there's another link, and you can possibly find an old 401k that you've left behind. That's really valuable. Now, I have a question about the jobs report. As we all saw, the December 2021 jobs report came out as 199,000 jobs, which was disappointing. It was half of what was needed and expected. Now, to your point that you had mentioned before, of the Great Resignation, so many people left their jobs to make a move, not a lateral move, not oh, here's another job at about the same pay and all that. No, they're increasing. They're going to a better position, more money, whatever it may be, a company that's going to pay them more for doing their current position. And to President Biden's sentiment of when he was talking about the jobs report. He said something very similar. He was giving his explanation of why the numbers are where they are. Do you agree with his point, or do you not, as far as explaining the kind of gloomy jobs report?
Well, the other thing we have to consider, anytime a politician comes up, they're probably going to tell you about half the truth. I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat. So when he was explaining the jobs report, there's some truth to that. But another thing we have to consider, and this is something that the administration and a lot of people on one side of the political aisle don't want to talk about, is this inflation. And that scares a lot of companies away from doing additional hiring. So when those numbers came out, yeah, there's tons of jobs that are open, and a lot of the jobs are people, that people don't want right now because they don't want to go back into the service sector. And you know, now how some people get by and live, I have no idea, but the jobs are out there and there are people there to fill them. But I think part of it is companies are not, unless they have a good indication that inflation is going to be short-lived, they're not going to put money back into hiring and training a lot of people to hire, like in corporate America, for example. So that's, as a matter of fact, you're seeing some of the other, like the opposite happening. Like you see a lot of hospitals that say they're kind of overstressed right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's because they've made a lot of people resign or got rid of part of their staff that maybe didn't want to get vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
That's a significant number. Mayo Clinic just did several thousand that they're purging because of that. Citigroup announced that at the end of this month, anybody there that's not vaccinated, there's the door. You're fired. And there are people that are perfectly healthy that have healthy immune systems that are. What I think is going to happen, I don't know if this will happen, but I can almost see class action lawsuits. Like, I've never had COVID, I've never missed work, I'm healthy, and I got fired for not making a health decision for my body that somebody else wanted to make for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be tough to stick in court.
Mm-hmm.
You can't to do these things as much as people think, yeah, we should, or whether we shouldn't. That's not the country we live in. You just can't. Case in point, I think there might have been, I read about this, there might have been a lawsuit, but I read an article of a woman who had already had COVID. So she had the antibodies, which apparently is better than the vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
She's pregnant now and doesn't want to get the vaccine while she's pregnant. She just got fired for not having the vaccine. So I think the heavy-handedness of this, these mandates, probably by corporations, not necessarily politicians, but corporations, is another part of the jobs problem. Mm-hmm. Not a huge part, it is a part, but I think just the uncertainty of inflation right now may be part to play in that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think we have a couple of things coming in this future week that, to your point about vaccination and firing for companies that have mandated that you have to have the COVID vaccinations or multiples or boosters or whatever it is that they've decided that they want to go after. It seems like, with a virus such as this, it's a coronavirus, which there are many of them. This is not the first ever in existence that you have to kind of predict the strain that's coming across from around the world. Roll out that new vaccine. The flu has become slower to where every 6 months they can see the strain that's coming. They're able to maneuver the vaccine so that we have the flu mist, we have the flu vaccine that comes around seasonally, right? This one seems to be mutating so fast that it's not just going to be, are you vaccinated? Are you doubly vaccinated? Do you have your booster? It's like, are we really going to keep up with these cards once we're 15 boosters down the line?
Yeah.
At what point is logic going to be able to come into this, that this is not the same thing as polio? It's not the same thing as mumps, measles, rubella, all those things that we vaccinate our babies for. This is very, very different. They're not ever going to mandate that you have to have the flu vaccine. And I know this is getting a little political, which is unusual for the show, but I think it needs to be something that is spoken about. At what point in time are they going to stop looking? Like, that tends to be our MO here in the United States is that, freak out, panic, panic, panic. We got blinders up. We're just going to look at this one topic. And then 2 months later, it's like, look at this over here. And then we're going to panic about this over here, but we're not looking over here anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now I know that more people have had Omicron because it's more contagious.
Sure.
But the effects are much weaker than the original COVID or the Delta.
Mm-hmm.
And people are piling into emergency rooms right now because they've got the sniffles and they have a cold. Well, I blame the mainstream media for selling that fear porn to everybody. That if they think they've got a little bit of a sore throat, they're going to die. Well, the mortality rate. I mean, you know me and the year I've had. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say, just cold about it. I mean, because those who don't know me, I lost my sister to COVID a year ago. 3 weeks after that, my other sister, she lost her husband to COVID. So, we've had this impact in our family, and it sucks, and we've seen the pain and what it does firsthand. But they sell these vaccines, and there's a lot of money to be made in this stuff. There's a lot of money to be made in a booster, and then a second booster, and a third booster. At some point, you're right. This, like every other virus, it just kind of fizzles out eventually. And you hear some doctors who will say, well, maybe if we, the more we put these vaccines and boosters, we're causing it to mutate faster, and we're not doing ourselves any good when we should probably try to focus on herd immunity. Well, those are the doctors, like per your last guest, that get kicked off Twitter or Facebook or for having a different opinion than what the standard, opinion is supposed to be. I thought science was all about debate and discussion. That's why I went over to Getter, like your last, because censorship is not cool. So I'm kind of transitioning off Twitter, and it's just those, when you see all that happening, I think people are kind of looking like, okay, are they seeing dollar signs? And when they lose trust in their healthcare professionals, which we shouldn't, and when we lose in our government so much, which I know governments are shady, even ours, everyone's is to some degree, but we shouldn't lose that much hope and trust and be so divided. And that's kind of where we're at. And when it comes to, especially this, the vaccine is case in point on how like divide and conquer is a strategy. If it leads, it bleeds. People are so afraid. I mean, you can still drive down the road and see somebody in their car by themselves with a mask.
Right.
Yeah, right. I don't know.
I wish that it was really driven home, and possibly, small platforms like this can drive it home that, I sympathize with your pain. I think we can all think back from when this first came over, which was, about February 2020 to present. There is someone we know that we personally love that we have lost for whatever reason due to having COVID. And, I am very positive in the fact that what you said, as it mutates, it tends, viruses tend to get weaker. And that is very promising. But what has been done is, instead of the message of we need to protect one another, the message was protect yourselves, take cover. And yes, of course, we all did in the beginning, because I think when this was first released and our systems first saw it, it was probably the roughest, and hopefully the roughest that we will see. But I agree with you. It seems like there's still a mental issue going on where it has been taken too far. And, each human being is a different pod of a human version. Some people really struggle with anxiety. Other people struggle with depression. Some people struggle with none of it, and they just don't feel it all. We have words to describe those people, right? So it seems like, some of the people that are maybe a little bit more sensitive on topics have taken it so extremely far that you're right. They're still driving alone, masked. They've got their doubly masked on their face, gloved, doubly masked on their face, and they're driving down the road. And it's like, what are you protecting yourself from? Because your eyes are still exposed. So if you're afraid of a parasitic virus, eyeballs are still exposed.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. And yeah, but yeah, I think the media has terrified people. Now everybody's body's different. Like you said, some people are prone to depression, some to other things. In the case of my sister and my brother-in-law, they both had autoimmune issues.
Good.
My sister was a cancer survivor, and she had a type of chemotherapy that was they just I went to every session with her for chemo and radiation, everything. I was there for everything she did. And they told her, said, it's going to wipe out your immune system. And her only goal was to live long enough to see her kids grown. She said, so I have to do this. And she caught everything coming and going. She couldn't help it. And she tried to protect herself, but she's not going to stop living at the same time, because life is precious. And what's a year behind closed doors without a hug from somebody, without people you care about? Life is precious. So that's why we have to live it. And she lived that way. My brother-in-law was the same way. He was the life of every party. Just he wanted to make sure if you left his house or something where he was at, everybody had a smile on their face.
Mhm.
He was living life. And would they have regrets to this day? Probably not. They were strong people, and they loved life and lived to the fullest.
Mhm.
And to this day, and I kind of hate to get kind of sappy or sad about this, but when I talk to my other sister Tammy, and we talk about grief, and I always say that I'm so glad that my gratitude is so much bigger than my grief, because I'm so grateful for the life that I had with these people
Yeah.
that overshadows that. And that grief, when you think about it, is nothing more than so much love that we have in us that we can't share with that person anymore.
Mhm.
That's what that grief is. And some people may think that's sad, and it is, but that means that you had a lot of love,
Mhm.
and that person that you miss that much was that special. And how lucky are we to have people like that in our lives?
Yeah.
We should all be grateful for that. If you want to change your 2022 for a better attitude, sit down with a piece of paper right now when you're done with the show, anybody watching, and write down 20 things that you're grateful for in your life. And when you look at life differently like that, you through a different lens, you see happiness and not like, oh, everything's an obstacle.
Yeah.
Things that are obstacles, that's just one more chance to kick its ass. Right? That's the way I look at life. Anything. So, and yeah, I hate to again the financial report here. I am giving you,
That's okay.
but it's just this Delta thing, this Omicron, it will burn itself out eventually. There'll be 5 more things this year, variants of it that
Mhm.
people try to find out about. But like I said earlier, when we're talking about the finances, use those as opportunities to make good decisions with your money, because you know um, you have to. Don't make dumb decisions with your money. Be careful and be measured with your approach, and do your homework if you're doing it on your own, or find an advisor if you want somebody to do that for you.
Mhm.
Find somebody you're comfortable with. Anybody, like I tell you, every one of these shows, people are welcome to jump on vistafrontpartners.com and contact me through the website or through our Facebook page if you want to set up a Zoom conversation or a phone call or whatever. It doesn't cost a dime to chat, um, and it could make a difference.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, because that was my last question for you was, how can someone contact you? So I have it right there. You can contact JC at vistafrontpartners.com. You have a contact us section, or would you like them to directly email you?
There's a contact us up there, but if you want to directly email me, it's jc@vistafrontpartners.com. And right there on the website, though, you'll have my phone number. And then, of course, my business partner, Gary, his phone number's there too. So you're welcome to call either one of us. If you don't get one, you want to call the other, leave a message. We'll get back with you as quickly as we can. And we'll set up time to Zoom. I know where I work from home in Virginia. My office is in Frankfurt, and I get up there about once a month. I was going to be there this week, but the weather kind of nixed that one. But that's fine. So, so we talk to people in different places, and that's why Zoom is a good thing. Because I like to look at who I'm talking to when I'm talking about it, business, and I'm sure you do. So it's not feasible, I guess, within the times of COVID to go to people's houses, and people are careful about going to offices and things like that. So,
Sure.
but we're here to help, and so let us know. And sorry to drag on your show with so many different things, but it was
No,
good.
that's okay. Hey, I welcome it. I can do this show and we can stream for 2 hours long if we have something to talk about for 2 hours. I prefer not to just stare awkwardly into each other's eyes. People tend to not want to watch that. But
No, but if this show was a downer, listen to me ramble on. Jump back on her last show. That guy was freaking hilarious. I just went and followed him on Twitter or Getter before I came in here to talk with you. So, yeah, he was a funny cat. So
that was Bradley Laberman from the last show. Yes, he's pretty darn funny. But thank you, JC. You are always so informative. I love our conversations on the news. And so next weekend is my son's birthday, and he is turning 10. I have no more littles, as I call them, no more littles in the house after next weekend. So I won't have a news segment next weekend, but possibly the following one, and we can look into the end of January, and I'm sure we're going to have quite an interesting ride for the next 2 weeks. So thank you so much for your time. I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
hey, I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for watching. And Elizabeth, I certainly appreciate you giving us a platform to talk about things that people being appropriate with your money and long-term investing.
Well, thank you so much for the help. I really appreciate it. All right. You too have a wonderful weekend. All right, everybody, we are going to move on with the news this afternoon. So I have a couple of really, really cool reports here. I've decided to ditch the phone. I'm no longer searching through my copy on the phone. So it's going to move so super smoothly. And first up in the news, mushrooms. That's what that is a picture of. Mushrooms. How do they play into the news? Well, you've heard. So Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, he has actually invested, it was about 18 months ago, he put a whole bunch of money into psilocybin, which is the psychoactive property in magic mushrooms. The mushrooms that you either, from what I understand in my research, you either eat the cap or you eat the stem, but they will give you two totally different experiences of psilocybin. And in the news, the mushrooms, with, like I was saying, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, people like himself who are pouring money into research, they're finding that it is showing a huge advancement in the mental health world as an actual medication. And there was a landmark trial that for PTSD. So here it goes. Small doses of psilocybin, which is the drug found in mushrooms, some mushrooms, are good at easing disorders that are resistant to treatment. So there are so many different treatments, especially for our dear and dedicated and truly close to my heart, our military men and women that come back and they are suffering from PTSD. Well, they have been going into medical trials with samples of people of all walks of life, not just veterans, but they're finding huge advancements within mental health for PTSD treatment where other drugs are failing. Researchers have found that the drug can be safely administered in up to 6 patients using doses of either 10 milligrams or 25 milligrams of psilocybin. Treatment-resistant PTSD is the main focus of this one clinical landmark trial. And as the report goes on, a sample of 89 participants who had used psilocybin within a year, who were recruited to take part of the trial, randomly picked 60 people to receive either 10 milligrams or 25 milligram doses of psilocybin in a controlled lab environment. The doses were administered. The patients received one-to-one support from trained psychotherapists. So this wasn't just, hey, try this medication and off you go. They were closely monitored. And the remaining 29 participants, not percentage, participants, they had a placebo drug. And so they were studying it. They studied it over a course of 12 weeks. And they've noticed during the time they were assessed to track the number of possible changes, including sustained attention, memory, planning, as well as their ability to process emotions. And it goes on to say The rigorous study is an important first demonstration that the simultaneous administration of psilocybin can be explored further. So this is a groundbreaking research that will allow for further investigation with larger and larger trials of people for possible help with specifically in this report, PTSD, where other medications are failing. No one withdrew from the study, and there were no suggestions that either the psilocybin doses had any short or long-term negative effects on the participants. Overall, they are noticing some advancement in easing PTSD and its unfortunate effects. It took me a long word to get effects out of my brain. And they're going to continue with the trials. So far, they have been successful. That is really, really great news, because there's so much research out there and so much desperation in trying to help people with PTSD. And many traditional routes just aren't working. Many antidepressants are just not working for those clinical patients. All right, so next up in the news, this is a cool one, and this one throws back to Habitat for Humanity. Habitat for Humanity builds its first 3D printed house in the United States. That's pretty cool. Here is a picture of the house. I think I have multiple pictures. Yep, multiple pictures. This is Habitat for Humanity's 3D printed house. Let's learn more. Thank you so much for watching. Always make sure that you comment. I will put you into the feed. While 3D printing has been around since the 1980s, its use in home building is relatively new. It's a potential solution that Habitat for Humanity is exploring with its latest venture, and is pictured here in the broadcast. A home in Williamsburg, Virginia, nearly entirely made from 3D printing or additive manufacturing. Now that certainly sounds cool. While this first 3D printed owner-occupied Habitat home in the nation, every Habitat home constructed, renovated, and repaired is special because they partner with families with low or moderate income, veterans, seniors, and people with disabilities, says Janet V. Green, CEO of Habitat for Humanity out of Williamsburg. To bring this project to life, Habitat for Humanity partnered with Alquist in a 3D printing home construction company. And while this may be the first 3D printed home created by Habitat for Humanity, it is not the last. The organization already has plans underway for another set for completion in Tempe, Arizona next month. And this report came out just a few days ago, so next month, meaning February 2022. Actual process behind 3D printing a home uses concrete, a medium that can cut out building costs by up to 15% per square foot. Concrete is also able to retain temperature better than many other materials, meaning that heating and cooling costs for this abode will be below average, a huge benefit to those that occupy the Habitat for Humanity homes because they are low-income residents. The final product of this home boasts 3 bedrooms and 2 full bathrooms in total across a 1,200 square foot floor plan. Plus, it's Earthcraft certified. That's a mouthful. It is Earthcraft certified, meaning it minimizes environmental impacts and will not cost as much to maintain. So that is an awesome project right there. I'm actually looking for myself, even though I saw these pictures last night. Look at that. How cool is that? 3D printed Habitat for Humanity home. Next up in the news, yes, this is a cool, uplifting story. It is a Chicago man launches a group that uses books to connect dads with their kids. Joseph Williams is helping other dads navigate the world of parenthood. 10 years ago, Williams, a father of 6 from Chicago, served 9 months in prison for possession of a stolen vehicle. Upon his release, He dedicated himself to doing positive things in the community, including volunteering in his children's school. One day, he was asked to read a book to his daughter's class. It was such a hit. The teacher and students asked him to return. This inspired Williams to launch the Mr. Dad's Fathers Club, an organization that offers enriching activities for kids on Chicago's South Side, as well as support for dads. The group has now grown to 150 fathers in the group. Their goal is to build a community center and library that will offer resources to parents and kids alike. Congratulations, Mr. Williams. That is an amazing story. That is a wonderful, wonderful piece of great real news in the broadcast today. Next up in the news, we have, this is so cool. Take a look at this picture. Any guesses as to where in the world this is? Where in the world could that be? It looks slightly Celtic, doesn't it? I think the houses with the thatch roofs just gave it away a little bit. This is Scotland. Here is a cool story. Ever thought about just ditching it all and running off to Scotland? Become a wildlife ranger in Scotland with a free cottage to live in. What? Yes, it's for real. A wildlife ranger is being sought for the north coast of Scotland, and a free cottage to live in is included in the job description. So, are you a wildlife ranger? Would you like to go to Scotland and have free housing? Someone to take over the position of Honda Island Ranger is within the job description. It's a remote island off the coast of Sutherland in the Highlands of Scotland. The successful candidate will be treated to stunning sandy beaches, as you see them here, because this is, there we go. There's another picture of Scotland. Look at the sunny, wonderful beaches. Spectacular views from 394-foot high cliffs, and getting to know the 100,000 breeding seabirds living on the island. The interested will need to have a good knowledge of the local marine and terrestrial natural history, excellent people skills, and organizational abilities. And it does not say where you go to go apply for this job. So Google it. All right, moving on. Last story. All right, this is kind of cool. Whales once walked along the coast of North America is the title. And here's the rendering of the whale that they believe walked along the coast of North America. I'm giggling through this just a little bit because this rendering is very I don't know. You guys fill in the blank there of what I want to say. So the article goes like this. A tooth found nearly 50 years ago has recently been re-examined and found to contain the remains of a land-going whale from an extinct family only found in Pakistan. So they're saying it's the cousin of walking whales. Man, let me not butcher this word. The family of Remingtonocetes. Remingtonocetes. That's probably better. Remingtonocetes. There we go. There's articulation class with Elizabeth. In 1973, a premolar of the new species of walking whale was found at a stone quarry in Castlehane, North Carolina. Interesting. In 2020, it matched more closely to the fossils found in Pakistan of Remingtonocetes, not other extinct whale genres that were known to live along the coast. So it didn't match up with other whales. Rhymes with males. Other whales. So this is, I would say this is more cool. This is actually the fossils, the bones that they found, and they were able to put them together. Now you see here where they're showing the feet, which I guess is where the photo rendering is coming from. That could also be flippers, right? That could also be flippers. I don't know. I'm not totally bought into this. In 2019, another specimen was found in Peru. The animals tended to average around 10 feet or 3 meters in length and have powerful jaws that are suggested to have been enough to allow the beasts to prey on crocodiles. Whales that ate crocodiles, is that a thing? Sound off, guys. Give me a thumbs up. The fossils really start to give us a sense of when whales moved out of the Indo-Pakistan Ocean region and started dispersing across the world. The professor Jonathan Gelsler told Life Science. This is a really interesting article. Obviously, you can go on to lifescience.com and read more for yourself. Like I said, I'm not a scientist that studies very old animals or the evolution of such, but there you go. That's what's up in the news from this past week. So everybody, thank you so much for watching the Caffeinated Cooper Show. This has been the news, and today is January 8th, 2022. I'm wishing you a wonderful day. Thank you so much for staying connected and following us and commenting. It really brings the show to life. If you're watching this in post-production and possibly watching it on Amazon Prime Video or the Binge Networks TV or any other platform that we are currently on, please make sure to catch the live show. Go over to YouTube, to the Caffeinated Cooper Show channel, like us, subscribe, and you will never, ever miss another live show. So until this week, when we have a few more interviews coming for you, and I'm so very excited for that, I want to always, always tell you, we are blessed, you are blessed, and I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again